So K-State had a big weekend last weekend. They have lost 2 kids who did visit DY that have committed, Richard Torres, Braden Miller. But K-State also pulled a surprise by getting Caden Crawford to all of a sudden show up. And not only show up, but show up throwing the cat signal with Taylor Bratt and Silas Etter, a K-State commit. So taking all that into consideration, how do you grade out what the last weekend was like for K-State on a recruiting standpoint?
Almost like a little bit of a wash, right? Like you got that really nice surprise of Caden Crawford being on campus, and it might be indicative that there's conversations taking place on that front. But on the other end, you lose Braden Miller to Michigan State. Although I will say that blow probably not as significant, even though they also lost Nick Herzog about a week earlier. I just don't see the offensive line loss as that significant because, one, Connor Riley has proved that he's pretty good at scrambling and finding alternative options that are pretty much just as good. But secondly, because they do have other options that are just as good that will be on campus shortly, and one of those will be offensive tackle Caden Weatherby. So not as concerned there. The quarterback is a little bit concerning because we're sitting here in the middle of June and we don't know where they're going to turn at the position.
Derek Young again is talking with me here. So what to you is the bigger story that K-State, if I asked it to you this way, the bigger story that Caden Crawford did show up or that K-State has lost those 2 commitments already?
To me right now, it's that Caden Crawford showed up because I think it's a pretty significant story. And maybe it's something that could transpire into something more meaningful and be what kind of breaks the dam for them a little bit and allows them to surge a little bit, not just recruiting in general, but in-state recruiting, local recruiting, which is where they've probably had most of the, primarily is where their problems have been. So that's my thing. I think it's a bigger story that they got him on campus because I do think that it's more than just that smoke in terms of that recruitment. And I think that you can kind of backfill. Braden Miller's not a significant loss. Obviously, they wanted him. He was one of the best offensive linemen that they've been recruiting. But I just think that they can kind of replace and backfill that void pretty easily. The quarterback, maybe not so much. We'll see what transpires. It's the middle of June. It's camp season. Maybe in the next 2 camps they can find a quarterback option that they like as well. But I do think it's a bigger story that they hosted Crawford for a visit because I don't think it's no small thing. I don't think it was just, oh, hey, he's there visiting family, because obviously everyone knows he has pretty strong familial ties and connections to the university. I mean, he's throwing up, like you said, throwing up the cat signal. He's not there. He wasn't in that picture. There was no family in that picture. It's a Kansas State staff member, a Kansas State commit. He has, the badge on, the credential, showing that he's a visitor. So I think it was more than just a courtesy visit.
Yeah, and it's the type of thing where, like, with that picture, I mean, he had to know that was going to get out, right? I just don't imagine that you take that picture thinking, like, oh, whatever. And then posted it. I know this is, like, crazy that it's 2021. This is how we have to cover recruiting, but throws it up on his Instagram story, which means, like, he's essentially endorsing that picture and putting it out.
Yeah, the further I've kind of dug into it a little bit, just his recruitment in general since that visit took place, I think some kids sometimes they just don't understand everything of what can happen. So I don't necessarily think he thought that picture was going to be on Twitter and it's going to blow up. I don't think that's what he thought was going to happen. I don't think he was concerned about it leaking, but it did. But I don't think that it upset him, but I don't think that he actually thought that was going to take place. But, with that being said, it did not offend him. He wasn't upset about it. And like you said, he put that picture on his Instagram story. He put him and Silas Etter in Kansas State uniform on his Instagram story. And then also on his Instagram story, he put a new one on that wasn't even out there with him and Chris Kleiman. So he's definitely leaning into it a little bit more than I think folks covering Iowa are trying to downplay it. I think he's leaning into it more, enough for me to think it's more serious than they do.
Just reading today, Derek, the update that you guys have about a potential junior college tackle that K-State is after for the 2021 season. This would be somebody that could be plug and play right away, and we've talked for 2 years seemingly about K-State's needs at tackle. I think right now they have at least a decent contingency plan with having to play Cooper Beebe out of tackle. He can certainly get the job done, but you'd prefer to have him inside where he is even more effective if you had a tackle outside. What are the odds? First of all, we'll start there. What are the odds that K-State is able to get, and I'm going to butcher his last name, but Kingsley Uguwu? What are we going with for a last name there?
I think Kingsley Uguwu would be the name.
Okay, Kingsley Uguwu. All right, what are the odds that K-State winds up getting him?
The impression I get right now is that they are the leader in the clubhouse, but I don't have a ton of conviction behind that. I know Texas Tech, Baylor, and Colorado are also in the game, or at least offered at one point. Some of those offers are a little bit older, so I don't know how accurate or how much they exist even at this point. But I got the impression that Kansas State was at least in promising position. But I guess my concern a little bit is he is kind of, willing to listen to other schools a little bit more is the gist I got after speaking with Ugu just on a brief note.
As in he's trying to wait for other offers to come in, or you just mean speaking to others that are already involved?
I think it's waiting to see if there's other options that are going to come his way. Now, I don't know how much time he actually has. We're probably in the middle of a summer session, so he probably has a little bit of time. But you think he'd want to be on campus, the sooner the better if he's going to want to compete for a starting job as soon as this fall.
How is it that he popped up this late? Is that just a product of how weird JUCO football was this year and everything was with the pandemic?
I think so. Because I think the talent at the junior college level was a little bit more barren this year because of the pandemic and because they moved to a spring season. Because I think some players just elected not to go that route because it probably didn't see a whole lot of benefit in doing so, because then you're playing back-to-back seasons in a short amount of time. And, just a whole lot of other jazz that's involved with that. But I also think it takes some time with some of these transfers, both, FCS, HBCU, Group of Five, junior college, to make sure that they are actually qualifiers. I think this last year in the education world of COVID-19, that everyone kind of did their own thing to kind of, just survive and, and make it okay in terms of what classes to take, how much to take. I think their schools are having a hard time aligning the transcripts together to ensure that they are qualified too.
Even if K-State got him, this is something that maybe is more ingrained in me from Bill Snyder's program, where there weren't new guys playing as early and as often. But from what you've seen of him, what are the odds that he's somebody that could actually be ready to go by the time that they're lining up against Stanford at Jerry World?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair question. I'll be honest, I haven't seen enough junior college football or Kingsley Uguwu in particular to probably give you the best answer, just from my point of view. What I will say is this: I don't think Kansas State adds him right now at this juncture without at least believing that he's possibly going to be a starter day one. Because otherwise, I guess I just wouldn't understand the addition any other way, because it's not like they needed more depth at offensive tackle, right? They just needed a bona fide starter or left tackle, kind of the prototype, which he seems to be able to fill. It looks like that's kind of his layout. Otherwise, if he's just another depth piece, it feels like that's what they have, right? They have depth. I mean, Katori Levison's probably going to be a backup, and he started 11 games last year, or no, 9 games last year. So and then you also have Carver Willis, who played sparingly but was respectable in his little amount of time, and Whit Mitchum's coming up, and who knows if he's ready this year. Carver Willis, I think, is at least ready to be the third or the fourth tackle, which would be his role. So I guess if Ugu is not a starter day one, I don't know how he fits into the picture.